Hello everyone and welcome. In today's lesson, we will see how to express regret about the past or past actions. We will use the two words here, should have and ought to have. We will see some time markers, some time words that can mark the time, and dependent prepositions. Dependent prepositions are naturally and frequently used with specific adjectives, verbs, and nouns. Let's start with these two words, should have and ought to have. We use these two words to express regret about something that did not happen in the past. Ought to actually is less common. We don't use it that much because it is very, very formal word, but we use more the word should. This bill is so big. I should have used less electricity, or I ought to have used less electricity. So as you can see, should have is kind of lighter the way we say it, so we use it more. Let's see more examples here. Perhaps I ought to have used energy saving light bulbs. I ought to have used energy saving light bulbs. I shouldn't have fallen asleep with the TV on. I shouldn't have fallen asleep with the TV on. We can use it also in the negative form. We just need to add not after should or after ought. But ought not is grammatically correct, but we don't use it that much. Okay, it's rarely used. We usually use should in the positive or in the negative, like here. I shouldn't have fallen asleep with the TV on. Let's do this exercise here. We will fill in the gaps using should have or shouldn't have. So the positive form or the negative form. We shouldn't have damaged the environment. It's becoming a long-term problem. Number 1, people thrown things in the river. The fish population has declined dramatically. People shouldn't have thrown things in the river. The fish population has declined dramatically. Number 2, factories reduced pollution in accordance with environmental agreements. Factories should have reduced pollution in accordance with environmental agreements. Number 3, companies used fewer vehicles in order to lower their carbon footprint. Companies should have used fewer vehicles in order to lower their carbon footprint. Number 4, factories released pollution into the water. It has poisoned the ecosystem. Factories shouldn't have released pollution into the water. It has poisoned the ecosystem. Let's have another one here. We will rewrite the sentences, correcting the errors. Every sentence has an error, and we need to correct it. You really should have not watched a horror movie on your own. It becomes, you really shouldn't have watched a horror film on your own. We put not after should, okay? And before have, not the opposite. Number 1, I ought to have gone to bed earlier last night. I'm feeling really exhausted now. I ought to have gone to bed earlier last night. I'm feeling really exhausted now. ديما to بعد الأت. Number 2, we really shouldn't to have eaten so much at lunchtime. I'm feeling sleepy now. We really shouldn't have eaten so much at lunchtime. I'm feeling sleepy now. Number 3, you should drive more carefully on the wet road. You could have had an accident. You should have driven more carefully on the wet road. You could have had an accident. Number 4, should have I bought this desktop computer or would the laptop have been better? Should I have bought this desktop computer or would the laptop have been better? Let's move now to see some time markers that our words can express or mark the time. Initially, the factories were quite small. Initially means at first. في البداية. The factories were quite small. We have here the years, the decade of the 1980s. So during the 1980s, people invested money in the factories. At some point in the 1980s, people invested in the factories. We move to the 90s now. Throughout the 1990s, the factories grew in size. So from the beginning to the end, from the beginning to the end of the 1990s, the factories grew in size. Now in 2004, pollution peaked in 2004. By that time, many trees had died. By that time, it means at the start of 2004, many trees had already died. 2005. Following new laws in 2005, pollution levels dropped. Following new laws in 2005, pollution levels dropped. After new laws, after new laws were passed in 2005, pollution levels dropped. Since then, there have been some signs of recovery. From that point onward, there has been a slight recovery. Let's do this exercise here. Okay? We will take some words from the previous slide. These are the words that we can use, time markers, like initially, during, throughout, by that time, following, since then. Let's start. Initially, Easter Island was expensively forested. Initially, Easter Island was expensively forested. Number 1, the rise of a new civilization. The islanders built statues to honor their ancestors. Following the rise of new civilization, the islanders built statues to honor their ancestors. Number 2, this time the islanders were cutting down lots of trees. Throughout this time, the islanders were cutting down lots of trees. Number 3, his visit, the first European explorer noticed that there weren't many trees. During his visit, the first European explorer noticed that there weren't many trees. Number 4, the ship HMS Blossom visited in 1825 and the statues had been toppled over. The ship HMS Blossom visited in 1825 and by that time the statues had been toppled over. Number 5, an airport was built in 1987 and lots of tourists have visited Easter Island. An airport was built in 1897 and since then lots of tourists have visited Easter Island. Let's move now to talk about dependent prepositions. These prepositions that we use after a verb, a noun, or sometimes an adjective. Some words need to go with specific dependent prepositions. Okay? It's like a collocation. Yani if we have the word late, we are waiting for the word for after it. We are waiting for the preposition for after late. I am late for my meeting. Late could not be paired with any other preposition in this context. So in this context, we cannot use any other preposition than for. We agreed about. We agreed about the idea. He's really afraid of flying. He's really afraid of flying. There was an increase in sales. There was an increase in sales. Let's do this exercise. We will fill in the gaps using the dependent preposition phrases in the panel. Let's read them. Decline in, talk about, arguing about, grateful for, lack of, knows about, heard of, points in, ask for, effect of. Let's see the first example. Recently, there has been a lack of energy in the team. There has been a lack of energy in the team. Please make sure you help if you need it. Please make sure you ask for help if you need it. Number 2. Who is giving the lecture? I have never. Him. Who is giving the lecture? I have never heard of him. Heard of him. Number 3. My brother and I are always current affairs. My brother and I are always arguing about current affairs. Arguing about current affairs. Number 4. The global natural resources is worrying. The global decline in natural resources is worrying. Number 5. Thank you so much. I'm so all you have done. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for all you have done. Grateful for. Number 6. When you are stressed, it is good to problems. When you are stressed, it is good to talk about problems. Number 7. The economic crisis is enormous. The effect of the economic crisis is enormous. Number 8. Most of the population knows about climate change. Most of the population knows about climate change. And the last one, all of the scientific evidence, one direction. All of the scientific evidence points in one direction. Points in one direction. Very good. Let's have another one. Fill in the gaps with the correct prepositions. Have you ever heard of Esperanto? Have you ever heard of Esperanto? Number one. Why do they always argue about everything? Why do they always argue about everything? Number two. There was a decline the number of birds. There was a decline in the number of birds. Number three. There is a lot to be grateful for. There is a lot to be grateful for. Number four. This demonstrates a real lack of talent. This demonstrates a real lack of talent. Number five. How do I ask for directions in Greek? How do I ask for directions in Greek? Number six. I don't think we will ever agree about this. I don't think we will ever agree about this. Number seven. I really don't want to be late for work. I really don't want to be late for work. Number eight. My mother is very afraid heights. My mother is very afraid of heights. Number nine. What is the long-term effect of this? What is the long-term effect of this? That's it for today. Thank you so much for your attention and see you soon. Goodbye.